Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
All right, welcome into the next edition of Vegas Squares podcast. It is a chilly studio and there are no bodies in it because I am flying solo in the studio today. Our NCAA Picks podcast here on the Vegas Squares podcast. But no matter, we do have some phone-ins from the tokens, both fake and real. And we're going to do some NCAA picks. I know it's been a few weeks since both of these gentlemen have been on the podcast, but I'll start with real Token. Token, how was your Thanksgiving, my friend?
It was good. Hung out with the girlfriend, had some food before I worked, and then went shopping with her after.
Well, that's good. It sounds good. I've still never seen this girlfriend, so I'm not 100% sure she's not from Never Neverland, but fair enough.
She's legit.
Oh, okay, we'll see. I'll be the judge of that. And we've got Tony Johnson on the other line. Tony, how you doing, my friend? How was your Thanksgiving?
Good. Mine was good. Very chill, low-key. A little small gathering here at the apartment complex, actually, our floor, and that was kind of nice. And just basically watched a ton of football, pretty much besides that. So it was an excellent one as always. I mean, we have all these games, including the college game, which we'll get into shortly. That was pretty entertaining stuff.
Yeah, college football. We had some NFL football, which we'll talk about on our NFL pod. Yeah, it's been an eventful Thanksgiving. My family spent it at the casino buffet, which was a new endeavor for me. But I will tell you this. We got kind of lucky. Producer and I walked in, or we're driving over to Santa Fe Station, and she's like, oh, it won't be too busy, blah, blah, this. And, it was 2 o'clock. It was like 1:40 in the afternoon. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I bet this thing's going to be bananas.
Yes, yeah.
So we walked in, and so the buffet, from the elevators to the buffet, it's across the casino. I don't know, 100 feet maybe. And the line extended from the buffet all the way to the restrooms, about 40 feet west, all the way back to the elevators, 100 feet back. And then it took a turn toward the sports book. I know this, directionally means nothing to most people, but I mean, we're talking rap.
Wow. A long way.
And,
yeah.
I mean, those who know me know I don't wait for good food, much less buffet food. So we got a little lucky, though. Apparently, the producer's father is a little bit of a high roller with the station casino. So we kind of walked right in. So I was a little nervous.
There you go. Good.
Yeah, I was a little nervous that I was going to be waiting 3 hours for fucking trough stuffing, So, actually, not to poo-poo on that, the station's casino, the Santa Fe station, I will give them a modicum of credit. The food, albeit buffet, was actually incredibly good. We had prime rib, turkey, ham. They kept all the other stations open, like Asian food, the hamburger station, even if you weren't a big Thanksgiving guy. So I have to give them a tip of the cap for their Thanksgiving buffet production, all things considered. Actually went in there with low expectations and was surprisingly far exceeded. I will say that. So.
Okay. That's always a good thing.
Again, I'm not a huge buffet guy just because of, I don't have to have, top-of-the-line cuisine, but I like stuff that doesn't just sit in pots and pans for, who knows how long. And, I've seen one time at a buffet, I watched a guy carve a piece of ham for the first woman, and then go carve the fish option that was available with the exact same knife, and then go carve the ham. So I've seen that at a buffet before. So with all due respect, I had my share of kitchen nightmares with the buffet experience. So anyway, that was a little nugget about my Thanksgiving as well. But I'll tell you what, Thanksgiving in college football had an epic ending on Thursday night in Thanksgiving. We'll talk about that. Let's get the sponsors located here. 12-ounce sports radio, where we air every Friday evening, Saturday morning, and Sunday morning Friday and Saturday, NCAA, and Sunday is our NFL Picks podcast. Also, Seat Giant, promo code 12-ounce sports for your discounted sporting events, concert, and theater tickets. So, without further ado, I will discuss how many of you guys saw the ending, even if you didn't watch it live, to that Egg Bowl, the highlight, I guess. I'll put high in quotation mark.
I've seen it. I've seen the highlights. I did not catch the game. I was watching the New Orleans game at that time, so yes. But seen the highlights, seen the game, so yes.
Yeah, that was epically incredible. Token, I realized that, you know, you're in a rivalry game, you know, the situation, the stakes are high, even despite the fact that both of your records are obviously not what you expected them to be preseason. But, I mean, to lose a game that way, for those of you who didn't watch, basically, I don't remember the name of the guy. I know his last name was Moore. He took in what was supposed to be the game tying touchdown, made the game 21-20 in favor of Mississippi State, and decided to celebrate in an unorderly fashion by being on all fours, lifting up his leg like a dog in an attempt to take a piss, causing his team a 15-yard penalty, and then subsequently the extra point was missed by the kicker. Yeah, and which is ironic because the spread was 1.5 points, I believe, in favor of Mississippi State. So it kind of worked out for Ole Miss bettors to not have to sweat an overtime in that spot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Or I'm sure the books were happy about that because people that see a 1.5 point spread, if they like the underdog, usually they'll go for the money line.
Also
or
true.
People like the favorite, they'll still view the spread of -1.5 for Mississippi State. So I'm sure the books made out really well with that game. So.
Yeah, you're probably.
They did. They opened as a favorite. Yeah, I think they opened. Ole Miss opened as a small favorite or a pick. So yeah, they did well in that game because it's close, as you said. Mississippi State being a favorite. So yeah.
Yeah, but nevertheless, I mean, I got to imagine if I'm a college football player and I pour my blood, sweat, effort, and emotion into these games, even though, like I said, I think Ole Miss is 4-8 on the year at this point, and Mississippi State is 6-6. If I'm an Ole Miss player, I'm probably taking him behind the woodshed for a physical talking to.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
no doubt. I mean, there's no excuse at all. And then that's a huge rivalry, and it's one of those things that I think, you know, when we're not close to, you don't really get the probably proper feel for it. I know that's a really, really, really big one in that part of the country, and to blow a game potentially like that is, there's not much excuse, as you said.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're talking about. I've been on Twitter lately, a little active with the UCF-USF matchup that we'll talk about here in a little bit. And there's a hashtag obviously swirling for each team, UCF Hate Week and USF Hate Week. So I can only imagine the SEC, since it just means more, probably had a little bit more to say on Twitter. And the Mississippi State Bulldog contingency has more fuel for the fire with the meme wars with this guy lifting his leg and taking a piss, which apparently happened 2 years ago, ironically. Obviously less consequence, but DK Metcalf did the same thing. I didn't realize that until I watched the replay on Sports Center, that DK Metcalf had done the same thing and got a 15-yard penalty. And the place kicker at the time, I'm not sure if it was the same guy, but he actually made the long-distance extra point at that point. But it didn't really affect the game like it did here Thursday night.
Yeah, and that's sometimes what they don't realize in the heat of the moment, and like that little play has a big effect on the game, especially for the kicker. I mean, 15 yards is definitely a big difference in accuracy as well as distance for most college kickers.
Yeah, I was
for sure.
College kickers are pretty, already fragile as it is. I understand that the college extra point attempt is still very close, but moving them back 15 and putting that pressure, saying, here, you've got to stoink this, or you've got to make this for continued action. It's already enough pressure as it is. Yeah, he didn't need to be
even more.
Yeah, I mean, a freaking 15-yard for the NFL would be even worse. I mean, I think you're talking about a 50-yard extra point. That's never easy. But Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about the bonehead of the week there, Mr. Moore, and the Egg Bowl ending Thursday night. And I thought, like you said, we're not involved really. I don't think any of us in that rivalry. I thought it was excellent. Obviously, it warranted a penalty, but I thought it was a great touch just to lift your leg. Like I think Odell Beckham did it a few years ago in the NFL and got, I don't know if he got fined for that one or if he just got a penalty, but
I believe he got fined for that.
After
it was a smaller fine, but
after 3 unsuccessful attempts, I would hope football players, Tony Johnson, would stop doing this at this point.
I don't really have much more to add to this. I don't understand all these celebrations anyway. I'm kind of a resident sort of old school guy at times. I just don't. I'm not like saying things should be penalized, and I'm not really against general celebratory stuff. But I mean, things going this far and all this planned stuff, and these stupid pictures that they do in the NFL. It seems like after there's a turnover or whatever, just enough is enough. I mean, it just boils to me. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I actually like a lot of it. I mean, I like the fact that they kind of loosened the reins on the No Fun League in the NFL. That new moniker they were starting to get. But some things like taking a piss. I even go so far back as I really liked the Randy Moss when he fake pulled down his pants to the Green Bay fans. That was pretty funny because he actually.
Oh yeah, and then smacked his ass on the field goal post.
Yeah, that one was okay, probably borderline. But when you lift your leg to take a piss or do something along those lines, yeah, it's a little bit vulgar. But I mean, the only reason in the NFL I was okay with the Odell Beckham one, but in college you got to have some shred of, I guess, a little bit of dignity in that spot, but if they wouldn't have penalized it, I would have been okay with that too. So, all right. We are recording here on Friday. Action in college football is underway right now, but we do have one game that currently, while you're listening to this on Friday, will be active, and that's a game I obviously have great interest in. That's USF versus the University of Central Florida, UCF. Obviously, I haven't got to give a lot of rants this year because Central Florida, some would say, has underachieved this year. Now, I know going back to my time at the school, 8-3, probably 9-3 would have been great. Great seasons under their tenure, but fans demand more after 2 straight undefeated seasons, and that's just not the case. They are 8-3 currently this year, 4-7 against the spread. They've been a little bit of a nightmare trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do. Mostly the problem is trying to figure out if they can cover 35 and 40-point spreads, and they do in the first half, but not quite in the second half as they let their foot off the throttle a little bit. People are calling. And I'll take a chance here to bash the fan base here a little bit. People are calling for a coach's head who is 19-4 over almost 2 seasons here with a freshman quarterback, and they're averaging 47 points a game, and we're calling for the coach's head. I mean, this is a bit fucking ridiculous.
Absolutely. I mean, I could see maybe if Alabama had 3 losses on the year or something like that, then they were really pretty bad losses or something like that. But
I mean, still, would you take Nick Saban out of his position right now if somehow next year he went 8-3 with losses to Tulsa, Vanderbilt, and yeah, I mean, a Citadel loss would be largely crazy, but I still even if he lost to Citadel, Western Carolina, and Furman for 1 year, I think for all the body of work,
I think he'll get it back.
Yeah, he can't do that 2 years in a row. But I agree with you. Yeah, it's just, to me, it's just a little bit ridiculous. I will agree that the play calling seems a little bit vanilla, but I've also said since the beginning that this true freshman really shouldn't be I mean, at this point, he needs to get the game reps. We're about 7 games into the last time I said he really shouldn't be playing, but he really needs to get the game reps. Anyways, UCF's a 23-point favorite. The total is currently 61 at this spot. It's a primetime game, which they get every year on Black Friday. 2 years ago, we had one of the games of the year with a game-winning walk-off kick return touchback. Last year, we had the injury to Mackenzie Milton, which has shaken up this UCF football team into, I mean, I would think I got to imagine if he was on this team again this year, they'd be undefeated, looking at potentially, again, a playoff spot. Who knows with all the fucking mind fuck the committee does, but anyway, they're not. They're 8-3 at this point. They're still a juggernaut of an offense. That's a big number to cover in a rivalry game, but they've done it. They did it with ease last year with their backup quarterback for 3 quarters. And it's always, like I said, it's rivalry weekend. There's always a motivation factor here with this spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is in Orlando this time, but it is that rivalry game. I'd like South Florida in this spot plus the points if I had to make a play on it.
I'm going to go to the other side. I'm not fully and wholly convinced that with Milton that this team is significantly better because, I think the problems have been coaching decisions in game, the lack of, I think, quality halftime adjustments in certain spots, and certainly defensively they don't have the same team they had, even through last year. But that being said, South Florida is a train wreck at this point. They have what I believe is very likely a lame duck coach at this point. I can't see how Charlie Strong would come back. He's just been abysmal ever since Louisville. He has been he's been awful both stints here at Texas and South Florida. And I don't want to be backing teams with a lame duck coach and that are just completely overmatched, really on both sides of the ball. So again, I'm not really getting involved in the game because the line does seem to make it's high enough where I don't really want to be dealing with 3+ touchdowns. But if I had to be on the side here, I'd actually lay the points and maybe look at like the first half or something like that. Because again, I think this team, the lack of quality adjustments going into the second half, like you mentioned, Aaron, we're just not finishing games as well. I think maybe the first half that might be where I would go if I had to.
Yeah, I think I sit with you kind of there, Mr. Johnson, on a situation where the line, I'd like to think that the UCF offense is going to try to put up 100 on them. And USF really doesn't have a pulse when it comes to playing football this year. But you're right, a lame duck coach. I think of it a little differently. The only thing that really scares me is a lot of times these guys love their coach and want to play hard for him if they know that he's going to be fired. So that ends up sometimes contributing to a huge, close game where they should never really be into it. That's the only thing that really scares me. Ultimately, I'll probably stay away from this game. If I do, I think I'll be breaking out one of these 3-team 10-point teasers, probably take it down to 2 touchdowns with a 51 over, because I think the 51 over is probably way good, and potentially UCF could get that by themselves. But, that's the thing. What's going to come out of USF's locker room? I'm hoping for a fight. I always love good games, but at the same time, as a UCF fan, I'd love another log to add to the fire of the way that these programs have flip-flopped each other. I mean, 10 years ago, UCF was the doorstop for USF on their way to the Big East, and, there was a lot of... It was hard to be a UCF fan watching these guys. They were undefeated against UCF in football, and they just could never seem to get over the hump. UCF was mired in Conference USA at that point. The Big East, don't forget, USF fans cling on to this notion that in 2007 they were ranked number 2 in the BCS for 1 week, and then actually finished that season unranked with 4 straight losses. So never forget. All right, let's talk what we do every week, and let's give out our Heisman votes. And I'm pretty sure we're in a consensus here, but you never know. I still have my dark horse that I want to be invited, and that is Chuba Hubbard. I'm hoping that he, with Tua going out and with Justin Herbert having a little bit of a clunker, that we're going to look at least an invite for Chuba. But I will start, and then I'll go to you, Token. It's the Joe Burrow show. He is now currently minus 1,000 in some sports books to win the Heisman. Really, really rooted for him for most of the year. But now that he's the hunted, I am praying that he shits the bed maybe against Texas A&M and opens this back up again.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not Burrow, I mean... It's like a field bet at that point. I mean, Chase Young, I mean...
Like a Justin Fields bet?
I mean, that's not a bad play. I mean, I like either him or Chase Young if it's not Burrows, but I don't see it not being Burrows unless if he has a crappy finish to the year, or one of these two players have a really stand out there, and especially against the rival Michigan and against in the Big Ten conference title.
Yeah,
so.
I got to imagine that, despite the fact that I think Chase Young's little incident is largely nothing, the NCAA wouldn't feel 100% comfortable knowing that a guy that they suspended for 2 games wins the Heisman Trophy. Whether it's right or not, I have a hard time believing the NCAA trying to cling on to any modicum of this quote-unquote pride and dignity that they still think they have. Is going to let him be in New York on that night. But Justin Fields, Tony, is definitely an interesting spot here. He's played virtually perfect this year, and he really hasn't garnered a lot of noise. Is that really like some SEC bias given to Burrow? And Tua, up until he got hurt, was still largely the number 2 in terms of favorites, even despite a couple of less than stellar games.
It's some sort of, I'm not really sure what it is. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Toby.
No, you're token, he's Tony. You're token, he's Tony. We got this. We practiced off the air.
Shenanigans.
Yeah, you're ridiculous.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, no, I hope you're right. I'm sort of biased here. I do have a relatively large-sized ticket on Justin Fields at 12-1 to win the Heisman that I got very early on, second or third weekend of the season. So, and that was really nice because he went down to about 5-6-1 or so, and then again, Joe Burrow really, as you said, hasn't had one of those rough weeks against a quality opponent. In fact, he seems to have played some of his best football against the higher quality opponents, which is sort of the goal, and I get that. So I'm not, again, I really want Fields to somehow come through with this thing, but at this point, I would expect you would need to see a really clunker of a bad game from Burrow, and probably to lose somehow to A&M, which I think is incredibly unlikely. I know we'll get to the game later, and then maybe throwing another bad one against Georgia the next week. That would be the only chance, I think, because, again, as you said, he's such a huge favorite. He's played so well in the SEC, which certainly gets more eyeballs and seems to have more of a following in regards to the Heisman, movement here than Justin Fields, who really, as you said, hasn't done anything wrong. I mean, he's played extremely well throughout this season against a relatively strong schedule. The Big Ten has been pretty good this year. And Ohio State has played the majority of all of the teams in the Big Ten. So a little bit surprising there, but certainly I think it's Joe Burrow to lose. He would have to really throw in a couple of really bad ones in a row, I think. And you never know, but certainly he'd be the top of my favorite list.
Yeah, I think we're going to get you and I, Tony, the matchup that we've been drooling over, if all things hold serve in this spot, and that's the Ohio State number 1 with Justin Fields, and then Georgia pulls off the miracle. And
I hope so.
Gets to number 4 with Jake Fromm, and we're going to get the matchup that you and I have been teetering back and forth on. I will give you credit. With an asterisk. I mean, like I said, I just said Justin Fields has looked relatively perfect this season. Big Ten defenses tend to be a little bit, and I don't want to show much SEC bias. Big Ten defenses are a little bit more matador than SEC defenses tend to look. But statistic-wise, Justin Fields is blowing Jake Fromm out of the water. But I'm super. Part of me doesn't want 2 SEC teams in the playoff. But at the same time, we might get a matchup that you and I have been drooling over for, going on a year now.
Yeah, I still blame Kirby Smart for this one. I think that will hold him back to become an elite head coach, unless he can maybe make some alterations through these next coming years. Because offensively, he does not evaluate talent well enough at this point. And this is the second time that he's really had an issue with figuring out who the right quarterback is here. He also did not get a receiver in recruiting, a guy named Henry Ruggs, who pitched for Alabama, who was slated to go to Georgia and basically ended up telling him that he was going to pass, for somebody else or whatever. And I think Ruggs would have been a huge addition to this team. So, I don't know. It's to me, this one falls on Kirby Smart because it's night and day, the difference between these two quarterbacks. It's absolutely not close. And while Jake Fromm might have a better arm, in theory, and again, we can't really argue that, Fields not only has been obviously great, running the ball, but he's been very accurate on the throws that he's had tonight. And so there's just, to me, it's night and day. So, I don't know. But yeah, the two teams, though, certainly Georgia's defense, rivals, one of, if not the best defense in college football. I don't think there's any question about that the last 4 or 5 weeks. They have just really come together. So, it'd be a great game. God, that would be such a great game. Really good one. I'm right with you there, and I'm looking forward to that one if it does come to fruition. That'd be fun.
Yeah, fair enough. And we're going to talk a little bit about the college football playoff and rankings and standings and try to pick the mind of the college football committee as we go through these games, because I saw a fun one on Twitter. It was called the Doomsday Scenario. So I'll run a little bit of that by you as we get into these games. It was a fun one. It was basically like, if everyone shits the bed here and you get XYZ, ABC, who would get in? It was basically an opinion poll. But we'll talk about that because we've got a few matchups here. Let's get into Saturday's games. And again, if you're listening on Saturday, we're talking about the early slate here, the 9 a.m. Pacific time starts. And let's start with those Bulldogs. They are taking on their rival, Georgia Tech, their in-state rival here. Georgia Tech probably not going to put much of a fight up here. They are a 4-touchdown underdog at home. The line is 46.5, so obviously you can see the correlation here in that spot. They're expecting UGA to roll over the Yellow Jackets, and I think I see more of the same here in this spot. The domination by the Dogs over this rivalry. I haven't seen Georgia Tech really put up too much of a fight this year in a lot of the games. Maybe I'm missing something that you guys see, but 4 touchdowns is probably a layoff for me in this spot. I probably won't even watch the game, but I'm gathering that the Bulldogs win this game by 21 to 42 points.
That's a fair assessment. I mean, in my opinion, if I have to make a play on this one, I would probably take the Bulldogs, but this one I might even put in a teaser, do like a 10-point teaser. One of those 3 teams take it down to 18 and feel pretty confident in that. They want to impress the committee to stay around that top number just in case if there's some craziness behind them. So,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a spot where, Kirby Smart wants the team to stay healthy. They don't really need this game. While, Georgia sits in the 4th seed is irrelevant to them, but at the same time, obviously, they don't want to lose it. But you have a first-year head coach, I believe he came from Temple, who just is switching over the offense. It's been all year. They are inefficient in offense, only scoring 17.5 points a game. They've gotten above 24 points twice this season. So it's going to be a struggle for them against what Tony Johnson said is a ferocious defense, maybe one of the best in the country. So getting out, staying out to an early lead creates a situation with that 28-point spread, Mr. Johnson, that it's one of those, like I said, at what point does Collins get everybody out and keep everybody healthy? Because the real game that matters is the SEC championship.
Yes, I don't have much more to add. I think you guys kind of nailed it for the most part. The only thing that I would slightly add here is that obviously Georgia is a much better team. Georgia Tech is in complete transition, and they've looked strange on offense. They went out with a pistol like 75% of the time 3 weeks ago, and then I think they only went out of that formation like once or twice last week. It's just been a very strange sort of season for them. The only thing I would worry about if I was a Georgia backer would be taking the foot off the gas, as you mentioned. The real game is next week for them. I know this is a massive rivalry, but we know it's men against boys at this point. So I do think that if Georgia does get out to a lead, you have the back door, situation where Georgia Tech is not going to give up. They are going to be playing strong. This is, again, a big rivalry. So I would worry about, even out to a 30-plus point lead, I would worry about Georgia Tech getting one late and getting inside the number here. So, if I had to bet, again, I'm staying away from this. I'm right with you guys here. I would take the dog, but I have, not a lot of excitement behind it, and that would be my only fear here in this one.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's move into the big showdown of Saturday, and it is that aforementioned Ohio State, the number one team in the nation, 11-0, 4-0 on the road, traveling into the Big House to face Michigan. The current line is Ohio State -9. This line started the year, I believe, probably because of the Justin Fields uncertainty at Michigan with a 3-point home favorite. As you can see, both teams. Michigan playing a lot better lately. Obviously, started out with a few clunkers midway through the season there. I would imagine Harbaugh, if he somehow finds a way to win this, gets a lifetime contract at Michigan. The total right now is 50. This is going to be, Harbaugh is my kryptonite when it comes to college football betting. I bet on him. He shits the bed. I bet against him. He finds a way to show up at least enough to cover. So I'm staying away from this game. I will say that. The degenerate in me knows that that's a complete lie. I'll probably have action on the over just for a little something because I want to watch this game. And I have found, all full disclosure, I'll go to meetings and admit this. I can't watch football anymore without at least $5 on a game at this point. So
I'll go to meetings. I like that.
My name is Aaron, and I have a problem. It's pro and college. It's just, I don't know if Vegas is just beating the fandom out of me, but it is what it is, man. You got 11-0, 9-2 for Michigan. Again, I think Harbaugh gets that lifetime extension if somehow he finds a way to win this game, but no one on this panel really believes that Michigan has a shot, do they?
No, I doubt they have a shot to win this game. In my opinion, the line should be closer to about 10 to 11.5, something around there. But it's still no play to me. Michigan to me seems inflated at times, like with their line. Like they have a lot of backers that like betting them no matter what. So even get a fat number at times. They'll even lose like on a good number. So this one's no play for me. I do like your analysis of have to have some action, make it interesting, and you know what coffee cup I'm drinking out of? Life's too short to bet the under.
There you go.
Thanks. Well, it's funny that you brought the covering with Michigan. They've covered 5 spreads in a row, and 7 out of their last 8. They've really been a machine the second half of the season, and including actually against a quality opponent. I know they've struggled so often against great opponents in the Jim Harbaugh era, but I think the big win against Notre Dame at home back in October. While Notre Dame is not the greatest team, I admit that they're still a well above average. But they're a quality opponent. Yeah, for sure, and beat them by 31 was very impressive. So I do like what we've seen from Michigan. I do think the offense has gotten a lot better. And they had a really, really high-quality output against Michigan State, which is still a good defensive team. I've been impressed with what I've seen recently with Michigan. To me, though, and I do have a play in this game, which is kind of nice, I don't think any of this output is going to hold, actually, from either side. I'm going towards the under here, and I played at 51. I think it's jumped down just a smidge in the 50 range right now. Yeah. But and I wouldn't be surprised if this goes down a little bit more going into tomorrow morning. To me, this is going to be a bit of a slugfest in the sense that I think Michigan's only chance to win this game is to try to draw out as many plays as they can on offense and keep this as a minimal possession game, really from both sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's my guess here. We're also going to have some really subpar conditions in this game, too. So not necessarily rain-wise. I don't really care about that. It's the wind factor to me. I think the passing game is really going to struggle on both sides. The highs are only in the mid to high 30s here in this one. I think it's going to be a really drawn-out, disgusting game. And because of that, I'm with you guys in the sense, especially what you had said, Token. I don't want to be stepping in front of Ohio State at any point really right now. I mean, they've been so good and dominating everybody. I do think that the 9 kind of is meaningful here if you do have a disgusting kind of brawl fest. So I'm taking the under. I don't have an opinion on the side. I think it's a good line. But the under 51 is where I'm at here. Okay.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we got a record maybe be broken here in this spot in this game too. J.K. Dobbins, the great running back for Ohio State, is exactly 60 yards away from second on the Ohio State all-time rushing list. Can either one of you name the guy he would pass if he were to get 61 yards Saturday versus Michigan?
I'm not sure.
Archie Griffin?
Not quite. Believe he is the leader in the clubhouse. This guy.
Eddie George would have been my guess, but I don't know.
No, it is actually Ezekiel Elliott is second all-time rushing yards.
Oh, okay.
So J.K. Dobbins would be, I would imagine, if not this week, but will eventually get past Ezekiel Elliott for second on Ohio State's career rushing list in that spot. So, yeah, I'm hoping for a big game in this spot. You know, this game last few years has seemed like it's been a clunker, but it's had the emergence of guys like Dwayne Haskins a few years ago. Obviously last year Haskins just shredded Michigan at Ohio State, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Justin Fields and Ohio State. I wouldn't say it was the first real test because I'll give Penn State some credit, but this might be the first real test, quote unquote, for a Justin Fields-led squad that they've had this year. So this will be interesting, and ultimately I think they'll come out victorious, and this might actually help Ohio State by playing a quality opponent like a quality Michigan at this time of the year, as they do every year, but not always a quality Michigan opponent. So it'll be a good. I'll have to check and see maybe if like a teaser's in play here in this spot. Because like I said, Ohio State at a 9-point favorite, you take a 7-point teaser, move them to a 2-point. It might be an interesting spot to if I can find some other shit going on there. So, all right, the last of my early games that I see of great merit. We'll talk about any action you guys have before here. Excuse me. Clemson at South Carolina, another big number here. The only reason I really bring this up because we don't talk about Clemson a lot because we're just expecting them to basically roll into the playoff, and obviously that's well deserved. But this South Carolina team has beaten a team that is in playoff contention. The first thing I see is South Carolina is a 27-point home underdog. The line is 50.5 in this spot. What do you guys think about that? And what do you guys think that it would do if South Carolina somehow upset Clemson, but Clemson still won the ACC? So, Token, I'll ask you about the game and then about this doomsday scenario. That would you still see Clemson in the playoff with a loss to South Carolina, but still ACC champs?
I mean, it's kind of tough to put them in if they happen to lose this one. I mean, but
all right, good talk.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I mean, South Carolina beat Georgia, so if you're saying Georgia would be the SEC champions with one loss to South Carolina, I mean, I understand that the strength of schedule is obviously much better, but are you going to take away Clemson, a one-loss Clemson team who won the national championship last year? And that's going to be a hell of a debate, because if Georgia somehow wins the SEC with the one loss again to South Carolina, now you have two one-loss SEC teams, Alabama and LSU, on the precipice of also being put in. This could create a lot of chaos, Mr. Johnson.
I agree. My opinion and the committee's opinion, I think, would differ here. I do think the committee is pretty convinced, based on how the rankings have been and the few words that have been said, that they do not respect Clemson and their schedule this year, which some of it is not their fault. Obviously, the ACC is the worst it's been that I can ever remember. And the fact that they only play Texas A&M out of conference, which is still a strong opponent, but having to be a home game, and it's just, they're not. A&M is still not a great team yet, maybe in the Jimbo Fisher era. So to me, if they lose one of these two games, whether it's South Carolina or in the ACC championship, I do think that they would be left out. However, in my opinion, I would not leave them out because I actually do think they are one of the best 4 teams. It's hard to say because, they're just blowing out pretty much everybody besides North Carolina this year. And, I just think they're really, really good and really dynamic on offense. And Trevor Lawrence, he hasn't had much of a good season yet, and I think there's still a lot of good play left in him. Again, another guy that seems to really rise to the occasion, big games, and I wouldn't leave them out. So I would have them in, but I'm not quite sure the committee would.
Yeah, and that's where I have an issue. I mean, with all due respect, like you said, Texas A&M, a quality opponent, an SEC opponent, if we're going to get technical here in this spot, with a common loss to it, common loss as an SEC team, if they lost this game here, like I said, South Carolina also lost to, Georgia also lost to South Carolina in this spot, this season, which is their only loss. Like you said, who is Georgia played at this spot? Notre Dame, we could argue. I think the problem is they'll formulate an argument that makes Notre Dame a better team if it props up Georgia than Texas A&M if it props up Clemson. And that's my problem in this spot because
Florida, they beat Florida on a neutral site, and they beat at Auburn too. I mean, those are good wins.
No, I understand. I'm just saying, I agree with you. I think they should still be in. And again, I've always stuck to the notion, if you cannot win your conference, you should not be involved in the college football playoff. Because otherwise, what is the point of conferences at that juncture? Because it's basically saying, well, if I don't have to compete in an SEC title game, a la Alabama, but still find my way into a national championship, to me, in basketball, when you create a huge field, I can respect it. You can earn it out large. We don't have that option here. We literally have 4 teams for 5 major conferences plus G5, et cetera. Again, I think a standard barometer is conference affiliation. If not, then what are we doing here? We should just break it all up and just make it a regional freaking football game at this point. But that's doomsday. Doomsday scenario number 1 would be fun if Clemson were somehow lose this game against South Carolina. And, unfortunately, I see the committee leaving them out no matter what they do in the ACC championship, which, Tony, you and I agree would be largely unfair because I also agree, talent-wise, if that's what we're going off of, because we're still keeping Alabama in the mix for that same reason, talent-wise. That's their talent on the field. Yeah, well, their talent is now out for the season. So if you want to get technical, anyways. I would agree with you. I'd say Clemson should still stay in unless they get their doors blown in by South Carolina, which I don't think any of us see that happening.
That's not possible. No, it's not possible.
I could see if South Carolina does have to win this game, it's probably going to be by like a field goal or 4 points or something around there.
But all that being said, I'm laying the points. I think Clemson's just going to run through this. I think a lot of people actions generally towards the plus money in this spot. I think a lot of people are going to be taking South Carolina. Maybe a lot of SEC backers in hopes that they could get one of Georgia or Alabama or LSU, whoever's not the SEC champions, into this playoff. I don't know about you guys, but I would be turning off college football if we get a 4-team playoff with Alabama, LSU, Georgia, and Team 4.
So it's not going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, you never know. We don't know what the fuck's going through their minds. The only reason I don't think it would happen is because some of these other guys are on committee. Some of the other guys on the committee are with the other Power 5 conferences.
That is my opinion on the same. I totally agree. Yes, there's too many guys in different conferences. Yes, I agree. They just won't be allowed to happen. That's my opinion. No.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I do have a play in this one. I do like the over 50.5 in this spot. I did look at the weather. It's supposed to be kind of mild, possibility for a shower, but I think you'll see a few quick scores on this game, and that will push it over probably by the early start of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I'm thinking this game is like 49-10 in that kind of range in this spot. So I think Clemson rolls. And I think Clemson rolling over South Carolina would solidify them even more of a spot because of the fact that if Georgia even runs the table and wins the SEC, I obviously don't know how you keep them out, but Clemson winning against a common opponent against a team that obviously will be in the playoff would help them immensely against keeping, seeding would be huge, but also keeping them in that college football playoff because of the aforementioned ACC being a little bit of a dumpster fire this year. All right, early action. Anybody else got anything?
Yes, I do. I have East Carolina hosting Tulsa, plus 5.5, and some on the money line at plus 185. Is what the number I have out of that, but it's dropped down to 180. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback you guys with Clemson. First off, I'm in my first foray into the Circa Sportsbook for the locals out there on Sunday during the NFL game, so I wanted to get the Clemson line when it came out, because I thought it would come out too light, and it did. It came out at 26. So I do Clemson minus 26. I think the 39-10 is a really, or 49-10 or whatever you said, and I think it's a really good guess on that game. It should be really one-sided. In some of the 9 a.m. contests, I've got a couple under, surprise. Got a small one with Northwestern Illinois, which I think this is also one of those things that around the country people might think this is a rivalry. And being from the area, it is absolutely not a rivalry. Neither school gives a shit about the other, especially Northwestern. They're in their own world. So, yeah, it's not a rivalry. It doesn't matter. And that being said, another game where the wind will be up, it will rain, and both teams are just going to just take the air out of the ball and grind. And this is like 10-7, maybe final. So I like the under here. This one came out at 44, and now it's down to like 42 at some places. And I think it'll keep going. And then there's Louisville, Kentucky. I have the under 53. Which I think is more the same here, although I really like both defenses. This is more of a defensive play here. I really like both defenses, especially what Scott Satterfield has done with Louisville. They've thrown in a couple of funkers here towards the end of the season, but he has really turned that team around very quickly, and really like what they're doing there, especially when the defensive line is the best part about this team. Kentucky, as we know, has had a very high-quality defense under Stoops now for many years, and this team is no different. So I think this one will be a really tough, hard-fought battle, another really good rivalry game, and I like this one close and low-scoring here.
All right, fair enough. Let's move into the afternoon slate. We've got a bigger slate, although I thought the early games were the better games in terms of quality and teams. I think the afternoon slate produces a lot of good matchups here. I'll start with one of the worst matchups, and that's UNLV traveling to Reno for obviously the battle for the cannon here. UNLV has sacked Coach Tony Sanchez. That whole high school transition where they thought they were going to get a pipeline from Bishop Gorman just did not work. Nevertheless, Nevada is a 7-point favorite. Total is 52. We'll gloss over this one real quick because largely in the grand scheme of things it's irrelevant, but it's always nice to talk the state of Nevada college football here in this spot. What do you guys think about this one?
I mean, it's a big rival game, but we are talking about UNLV, and UNLV is not great, but, I mean, they did fire their new coach for right now, and I don't know what to expect, so no play for me.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a Nevada team that struggles offensively despite the fact that they're 7-4. I'm hoping that I took the dog. I took 7.5 in this spot. I'm hoping that somehow, some way, there's some fight in the Rebels. I'm actually interested. I could 5 years ago when I moved to the city, I could care less about UNLV sports and this rivalry. But I've gone to since 2 basketball games and 1 football game with this rivalry. And like you said with Northwestern Illinois, how it's not. This is quite the opposite. These guys hate each other, and it's awesome. I love it. And while I'm an outsider looking in, because I'm here in Las Vegas and because of the pure hatred for Reno, as they're so affectionately called, I'm hoping UNLV somehow pulls the upset up here against a pretty decent Reno team.
Yeah, this is. I think it needs to be said that Jay Norvell, the coach in Nevada, is quite possibly the most unknown and underrated coach in the entire FBS. I mean, this guy is unbelievable. What he has done with this team, they've had massive injuries. They are basically down to their third-string quarterback. who is pretty much a non-recruited guy. And they've won 7 games in a good Mountain West Conference. So it's been a good conference this year. And they have a win over Purdue and some other quality wins. I mean, this is a really, really well-coached team. They're, again, not really as much talent as they've had maybe in some previous years. But if they get some more talent there, this team could be really good in the Mountain West and challenge for some titles. But that being said, I'm kind of with you, and I think it's important to know that Tony Sanchez asked to coach in this game, and a couple of players came in and talked to the athletic director as well. I read about that, asked for him to let her keep him for this game as well. So I do think they're going to play with some fight here. And as we said, we've already talked about it being a rivalry game anyway. I'm leaning towards the points. Nevada already has 7 wins, so again, there's really no need for them to be in must-win mode. I do think that UNLV's going to keep this game close. So in a close game, I guess we'll take the 7 if we can get them.
There you go. All right, let's move forward to a playoff potential team. We'll talk about their playoff status here, too. That's Baylor, a 14.5-point favorite at Kansas. Kansas has been able to keep up with a lot of this teams this year. They've got got a decent win against Boston College. Ultimately, they are 3-8, 2-4 at home. Baylor has tended to play a little bit down to teams. We saw the game against West Virginia. We saw the game against TCU, a more quality TCU team than West Virginia. But Baylor seems to have been able to overcome that blown 28-3 lead. That seems to be an interesting number when it comes to blowing leads. But I think this is one of those teams that they have to have sexy victories. And covering the 14.5 and then some would probably at least help them a little bit in this spot. Total for this game right now is 49, Token.
Sorry, which game were we on? Sorry. I know, I'm in the shower.
Did you say you were in the shower?
Oh, I said it's in the shower.
Oh, I thought he said I just got out of the shower. I'm like, man, he took a
I know I'm weird. I'm not that weird.
Oh, my God. We are talking about the Baylor Bears at Kansas.
Okay, so 49 and 14. Yeah, I would take Baylor in the spot minus those points. I mean, at first I anticipate a push. I mean, but you're not betting for the push, you're betting for the win. I still think they win by almost 3 or 4 scores, so I feel like 38 cents kind of game.
Yeah, this would be a fun game. It's another game where I think passing is probably going to be pretty negligible. We got more really high winds, gusts to probably over 30 miles an hour, and both teams run the ball really well. I think we'll see some really quality play here on both sides. The difference maker to me is at the quarterback position, where Carter Stanley is not going to hurt you for KU on the ground, really, but yet Baylor quarterback, whose name is escaping right now, is a problem. He is a problem, and he's a senior, and it's a team that, as you said, is still motivated to win some games. While they're already in the Big 12 championship, yes, I don't think that motivation, goes away necessarily. So, in a tough spot here, I think I would slightly lean to laying the points on Baylor. I don't love it because again, Puka Williams for KU is an excellent runner, but Baylor has shown the propensity to stop teams from running the football in this conference. They've been the best defense in this conference all year long. So I would lean towards Baylor, but I don't have a plan.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, speaking of Baylor, I mean, we're talking, like you said, they are obviously already in the Big 12 championship at this point. Unfortunately, they did have that setback against Oklahoma, leading 28-3 and blowing that lead. If they come back and avenge that loss, obviously beating Kansas and then beating Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship, I mean, are we leaving them out at this point?
Yes.
That's unfortunate. It really is.
Yeah.
I have a huge problem with a 14 playoff eliminating 2 conferences in that 14 playoff. It's just huge. I understand, the SEC, rah-rah chants, but, winning major conferences, I would imagine we were gonna let Oklahoma in if they win the conference. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, you don't. Yes, I don't think so. You think the Big 12 is completely eliminated from playoff contention?
I do. I think they are eliminated at this point. If I was to guess, yes.
Very unfortunate. So
I don't think I don't think they'll jump Alabama. Assuming if they beat Auburn, I don't think they'll jump Alabama.
So we believe, and we'll talk. We talk about Bama. We believe that Alabama is a top 5 team with Mac Jones.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm maybe. Possibly he was a 4.5 star recruit. Higher recruit than Jake Fromm, by the way. So I mean, he can play. I'm not sure. I don't know. Hard to say. I just think the team overall is still really, really good. I mean, it's besides the quarterback spot, which is obviously very important. So I think they're very, very good. So maybe. But I just think that Utah winning out is more likely than any of the Big 12 teams.
What if they get a Clemson loss at this point? Clemson loss, Georgia wins the SEC. Do we see 3 SEC teams? We're gonna. It sounds like it.
Possibly. I think Utah's got a chance, but yeah. You might be right, though.
I think
I would say it's not Utah.
Utah's going to get that guy from USC, that USC loss. They're going to find a way to get 3 teams in this fucking playoff. I'm telling you.
I don't think so. I don't think it's
all right.
I would say there's more of a chance of 3 SEC schools getting in than Utah getting in, but
really? Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow.
And I do not agree with it, but I could see that more possible than Utah getting in, sadly.
I will, since on the NFL pods we make bold predictions, I will make a bold prediction that if Clemson loses in either of the next 2 games they play, 3 SEC teams, and Georgia wins, 3 SEC teams get in the playoff. 3 SEC teams and Ohio State.
That's a bold prediction itself, because Clemson is going to be, 20 to 30 in the next game. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But yes. Well, I mean.
And then I think we'll see an 8 to 12 team playoff, which I may get what I want by having this shenanigans happen. So we'll see.
We'll see. Georgia's going to beat LSU too. Even though I have a ticket with Georgia, 16-1, I do not feel good about it in that matchup. I think they match up terribly against LSU. I don't like it at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're the dog in that game, but it's a home game for them. So I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, it does feel home. So don't you think they're at least a touchdown dog?
Sure, but I also think that they have the defense to hang in. I mean, if they can stop Joe Burrow, I mean, I'm not no disrespect to Hilaire, but if they can stop Joe Burrow, they got a good shot at winning that game.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule out Georgia beating LSU if that was the case. And if I had to make a spread on that game, I would say it's a flat 7, and then depending on how the action comes in and moves either way.
Yeah, I got to imagine that if you like the dog, if it opens up at 7, I think the dogs will get the money. So I think
I don't. I didn't know about higher than 7. I think you guys are setting it too low. Right. I think it's closer to 10.
We'll probably have that conversation here, if not, next week. So.
It'll be fun.
All right, let's move into that Iron Bowl, Bama and Auburn. Bama is a 3.5-point favorite at Auburn. This game always has some interesting endings, and I think Auburn, obviously, we're not talking about them in the playoff, and because they are 8-3. But they would love to take Alabama out of these playoff discussions. Because please, for the love of God, at least agree with me that a 2-loss Alabama team is out of the playoff. You can't say
I would say there's still a 2% shot of them being in if they do lose this game. There's still a chance of that happening, but it's very, very unlikely.
Yeah, you have to have everybody lose, and Ohio State lose multiple times, these next 2 weeks. And, yeah, I mean, you'd have to have complete chaos. Yeah, complete.
All right. Well, we got the Iron Bowl again. Bama with Mac Jones, 3.5-point favorites going in. The total is 49.5. How do you guys see this one?
Probably Thunder. I mean, that total seems a little too high. I mean, Alabama's defense is going to be able to stop offense, slow it down. You're probably going to see a lot more running out of Alabama this week, especially with Tua out for sure. I mean, they still have a decent backup quarterback, but however, I think they won this game a little closer and just try and slip out with the win.
Yeah, I think it's a good line. I made Alabama like a 4-point favorite, 4.5. Although I think Mac Jones will look better than the odds makers believe. The drop off from Tua to Jones, I don't think it's as great. I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, it's hard to know because he hasn't really played against any real competition yet. It's tough to say. The one thing I will say as well is if there's any doubt at all if the game is close, I mean, Alabama will try and score and do anything they can up until the absolute last second on the clock. I do think that they have to do anything they can to try to win by as much as possible and be as stylistic as possible. It's very hard to do against a very good defense, but I do like that aspect of it, that Alabama will not stop at all, because this is obviously the last game they're going to play until the postseason time. So to me, that's my only worry here. I don't like the true freshman quarterback at Auburn. I feel like he's regressed as the year has gone down. Bo Nix, I know it's kind of a bit of an unpopular opinion, but watching the games, he's just not there. I really thought he was a lot better early on in the season. So that's a bit of a problem. He's been better at home. I'll grant that, but I'm going to slightly on Alabama here. I'm not going to get to the window, but I do think that they are the better team. And they're the way better coach team, too. So that usually kind of pushes me in that direction as well.
Yeah, fair enough. I have a slight lean on Alabama at this point as well. I think they are a better team. I mean, obviously this game, to take a page out of Mr. Token's playbook, this game really could go either way. Auburn is going to – this is the Super Bowl here for them. Obviously, they're not going to be involved in playoff talk, nor are they going to be in the SEC Championship. I'd like to see some chaos ensue. It's nothing – as much as I dislike Alabama, this is nothing really personal against them. This is a committee.
You like controversy and take up then.
I do at the same time, but I also like, if you're going to make decisions, hardline decisions on the future of these programs, and when I mean future, just the college football playoff, give me a reason that you can come out and say these things. Like Tony said earlier, we get no chatter out of these guys. They just put this shit out and let us do exactly what we've been doing for a month or so. And the thing is we're kind of at a loss because when we have these conversations or when we start having these arguments, we're like, I have no fucking clue what's going on through this committee's mind. No disrespect to Alabama. I understand that, they are a blue blood, they're a powerhouse. But, at the same time, again, you can't sit here and make it comes back to my main thing. You can't sit here and make a 4-team playoff and tell me that winning a Power 5 conference is irrelevant because your conference is deemed not as good by a committee of people who have vested interest in other programs. So, anyways.
Yeah.
Wisconsin and Minnesota. We'll move on. Wisconsin is a 3-point road favorite in this spot, 2.5 right now. Minnesota was once also talked about highly. They're sitting at number 8 in the CFP polls at this point. We'll get to their standings, but we'll talk about them if they're winning this game at this point. They're 10-1, 6-0 at home, going against Wisconsin. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is for Paul Bunyan's axe.
That is correct.
The total is 45, Token.
Give me Minnesota in this one. I think they will win this game. It'll be kind of a close game that comes down to about a field goal, and Minnesota lifts up the axe for sure. So,
winner goes to the Big Ten West. Winner goes to the Big Ten championship in this spot. So
that's a big game. Big game. Yeah. Yeah. I have more I have more faith in Minnesota right now in bigger games than Wisconsin at the moment.
Yeah, I think they're a better team. I'm with you, Joe. I think they're a better team. This is, for all the weird TV history buffs out there, this is the first time the ESPN Game Day show has gone to St. Paul in its history. So that's kind of a nice thing.
I really hope they're in.
I don't think they are, actually. So it looked like they were filming outside on one of their, pre-shows yesterday. So, yeah, I don't know. It's pretty cool. But, yeah. So, here's another massive shocker, coming from myself here. We do have a play on, total, and it's none of that. This one came in very low. I had the line set before it came out at 41 total points. My own judgment, and it unfortunately opened pretty low at 48. But I did take it at 48 because I kind of thought it would move down, especially if we did get some bad weather coming in, which was obviously unknown on Sunday and Monday. And it has come to fruition, especially with wind. So that's kind of nice. This one, as you said, is a little bit lower now. So I feel good about the number I got. And that's really all I know about that. If I have to play the side, I am 100% with Token here. I think Minnesota's a better club. I think they're the better team, and really, it's not much more that needs to be said besides that. That if I can get in a spot, on a home game, getting points with the better team, we're going to do that every time.
Yeah, I think it's a consensus here, boys. I think Minnesota is going to win this football game, and I think the committee's praying that they do not. Because that would create, another spot. Well, it would create another spot where Minnesota goes up against Ohio State, and if Minnesota beats Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, they've got to be in. They've got to be.
Oh, yes, I would hope so.
But the committee sits on Big Ten teams, not Ohio State or Michigan, probably, and one loss. Minnesota is probably going to be out.
All right, so let's get back to our doomsday scenario. So Clemson loses a game, but still wins the ACC.
If that scenario happens, then yes. But
okay, well let's just play this out. Clemson.
Yeah.
All right, let's play out the lesser doomsday. Clemson wins the ACC. Georgia wins the SEC. Minnesota wins the Big Ten, and Baylor wins the Big 12, and
Utah.
No, not Utah. Wins the Pac-12.
Oregon.
Are we just going to go ahead and put Vanderbilt in the playoff here at this point? No.
Vanderbilt? That's going to be tough.
Yeah, it was a joke. The fourth team.
What happens this week with Alabama, though? With that scenario,
Alabama wins. They beat
Alabama wins
by 1 point. It doesn't matter.
I got my 4 in your scenario.
All right, let's hear it.
Clemson is your 1, and then I believe it will be Ohio State in like the 3-ish range, 2 or 3 probably, where they move down. Georgia is in that other spot, 2 or 3. And Minnesota gets your 4, and I think Alabama's out at 5.
So then all of a sudden we have 2 Big Ten teams in the playoff, huh?
Yes. I do think 2 Big Ten teams would do it.
Wow, that's a hell of a turn of events. I mean, that would be crazy. I would imagine I'm similar to you in that spot, but as far as my playoff in that spot would be Clemson 1, Georgia 2, Minnesota 3, LSU 4. Of what I believe they would do.
The committee said a lot by lowering LSU and moving up Ohio State last week. I think that was a huge deal. That is not really being talked about as much. I think that was a big decision. I am shocked. I mean, how does LSU move down after rolling somebody and really being great pretty much throughout the season, playing a difficult non-conference game, a really hard non-conference game? I don't get it. I don't get it at all. So I think they've fallen in love with Ohio State, and for right reasons. I think that team is held in very high regard. So if they beat Michigan and lose to Minnesota, I think they still get in, and it's going to be hard to say no to Minnesota. Very hard.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's an interesting thought because, like, you have a Big 12 Baylor team who's won the Big 12 title, and their only loss is to Oklahoma, who was also a playoff contender, versus Minnesota, who won the Big 10 title, and their losses to an Iowa team, again, by 3 points, I believe.
Something like that.
It was just not impressive, though. It was not impressive. They played a lot of really close games and barely survived.
I mean, Minnesota's played a lot of close games as well. I mean, they went toe-to-toe with Fresno State this year. They went, what, how many overtimes against... God, who was it? No, was it... correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it San Diego State? They went, like, 2 overtimes with them this year? No? Okay.
I thought it was overtime against Fresno. That was the Fresno game?
Fresno, the overtime game? Okay, fair.
Yeah, that was an overtime game. Yeah, they did not play well at Fresno. Yeah, that's true.
Georgia Southern by 3. I mean, they've got some head scratchers in the beginning of the season. I mean, yeah, I'm on Gopher football. I'm rooting for them. I'm just saying, if you're going to put one in over the other, I would say, I'm looking at Baylor's, schedule here, and we're looking at the team. I mean, Rice, that was a close game for them. That probably shouldn't have been.
Everything's been close, essentially. I mean, how many? They don't even have very many rounds. They beat K-State by a lot. That's all I know. They barely beat a bad Texas Tech team. They barely beat West Virginia. They barely beat TCU. These are like non-bowl teams. I don't know. I don't like it very much.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, Illinois, 40-20. I mean, it would be tough. It would make for a huge conversation. I think my personal bracket, I would have to leave Ohio State out and put in a conference champion. Now, I understand that Ohio State is probably the better team on paper, but again, this is where I say, on the field, this is what happened. You lost to you're not a conference champion at this point. And maybe that, again, that's the one small straw that eliminates conferences, which unfortunately for monetary purposes I never think will happen. But yeah, I mean,
it could, but it would have to have a lot of different scenarios to happen to have it be effective.
The likes of like Vanderbilt and that's the first one that comes off the top of my head. Maryland now in the Big Ten. The likes of these teams that are basically receiving large chunks of money to be mediocre in all their sports, they're going to raise their fist at the thought of conference disintegration.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think
Maryland could be great, though. Maryland could be great, and they're good in other sports. So lumping in with Vanderbilt, I don't think it's fair. Because Vanderbilt cannot be an elite like football and basketball. They just can't.
You're right, but Vanderbilt's also a top-notch.
In baseball, maybe, but yeah.
But again, I mean, if you're only looking at football and basketball, I mean, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm not disrespecting. I mean, Rutgers, we can throw Rutgers out the window right now. But
yeah, Rutgers is a problem. Yes, that I agree with. Yes, they're a problem. They're the same kind of problem like Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt's academic needs are tough to bring in really good athletes at the two sports. So yeah, it's just tough. It's tough to do.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with that as well. Yeah. All right, so let's look into. That's about it I have for the later games. Actually, no, we have a couple more later games here. Oregon, 19.5-point favorites at Oregon State, or at home versus Oregon State. We've already eliminated Oregon, obviously, from the playoff, no matter what they do, because of that loss to Arizona State. So, what's the motivation factor here for the Ducks, boys?
Just to win. I mean, that's pretty much said. I'm not going to touch this one, in my opinion. I could see literally Oregon putting up handfuls of points at a time, but I could also see them being stalled here and there by this Oregon State defense. That's no play for me. So.
I don't have a clue. I'm not terribly shocked that they didn't play all that well against Oregon State. Arizona State treated that game as really their Super Bowl after losing 4 or 5 in a row, and they were really ready to go for that one. But I think Oregon will obviously care about this game. It's a rivalry game, but to cover 19 points I don't have a terrible high amount of interest in it. Certainly they care more about just getting through the game, winning it, and then playing the title game next week. So, yeah, no play for me.
Yeah, I don't really have an official play. I'll probably sprinkle a little bit on that dog, Oregon State, maybe hoping for a fun upset for them, just to kind of maybe put a little positive spin on their season in that spot. But you're right. Yeah, we have no real interest in this game, but it's a ranked team, so I figured maybe there was a spot where they might have to show up and play some football. Notre Dame and Stanford, another game that. Stanford's obviously down this year. Notre Dame not in the playoff discussion. Brian Kelly has been rumored to be having conversations with Florida State. I can't imagine that he's going to leave Notre Dame, but maybe if there's a thought that there's rumors that he might be fired, he might jump ship before he has that opportunity. So that being said, Notre Dame is a 17-point favorite, total 46.
Yeah, for me, I would take Notre Dame in the spot. I mean, they're looking for anything that's remaining positive and probably get some other recruits during the off season, but still plenty of competition left this year. So.
Yeah, this is we're calling my biggest wager of the week here, and it's yet another under bet. And we got a lot of those this week. I've got this at a lot of different numbers, 52, 50.5, 50, 49, I think. So I'm just going to kind of play as it's been going down. I might be done now because it's much lower. But, yeah, I think this is going to be just a pace, the game dictated by pace more than anything else. Notre Dame tends to come in these games. I looked at the stats for the last 3 years, and they play on average about 2 times as slow against Stanford than they do the rest of the season, the first 9 or 10 games. This game always comes out at the end. And I think that's just dictated because of the opponent, Stanford. Stanford kind of forces you into that mentality. And, both teams are going to run the ball a lot. And I really like what Notre Dame has done in the last few weeks after the loss to Michigan. They really rallied nicely. They struggled in one game, I think it was Virginia Tech, but besides that, they've actually played pretty well. And, if I had to take a side, I guess I'd be on Notre Dame here. I think they're the better team, but I like the under for sure, and I think this would be a low-scoring affair. I'm not really quite sure that either team will get to much more than 20 or 21 points in this one.
Yeah, I'm actually on the other side in this spot. I'm taking Stanford plus 17 points in this spot, and I understand it's a very different team than the ones David Shaw has had in the past, but this is going to be the one that David Shaw gets up for. Again, they're 4-7 this year. They've lost 3 in a row. They're 3-8 against the spread this year. But under David Shaw, Stanford is 17-0 straight up in non-conference home games. And like I said, trends are made to be broken, but I think we're going to have a close game in this spot, probably protecting your under. I think you're right. I think we're looking at somewhere around 17-14, 21-17. I think Stanford might pull this victory out. I think that's highly more unlikely. But I'm going to take 17 points in this spot in a rivalry game with 2 teams that really don't have much to play for. Notre Dame's probably been seated in a bowl already. I'm not sure which one they're destined to go to, but it'd be a nice cherry on top for a tough season for David Shaw to come out with this win. But I'm okay if he covers because I'm taking plus 17 in the spot. So
you got money line bet too?
I might see where we're at this point. I put in the 17 last night at work. I did not touch a money line, but at that point I might as well sprinkle a little bit. It's got to be in the 5s, I would imagine, or more.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, let me pull that up.
All right, that's it.
I would say it's probably higher than 5. Yeah, you should get some a good number there. Mm-hmm.
Well, unfortunately,
I was thinking like around 8.
Right now, my phone's a little occupied right now. So if one of you guys,
I'll pull it up right now.
All right, that's it for me on the afternoon games. Or anything else on the slate as far as the afternoon games that you guys have in action?
No other place for me. I just looked up on Winwood plus 550. Let's get it 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe Tony Johnson struts on over to the Westgate and throws in a $2 money line for me.
Sure, if you'd like, absolutely. I have it on the yeah, we can certainly talk about that. I can put that in. Yes, I have nothing else that I believe in that time frame of games, so I think we can just move forward.
All right, I got a couple of late games here as we wrap it up. First one on the docket is LSU. We've talked about them a few times, obviously, throughout the course of the show. They are 17-point favorites at home versus Texas A&M. Like you said earlier, Mr. Johnson, that Texas A&M is no slouch. But however, LSU really just has to. Well, I mean, they don't really necessarily. I don't know if they necessarily have to win. What do you guys think?
I mean, they can't look bad if they lose, in my opinion.
I gotta imagine if they win the SEC championship, it doesn't matter how bad they look in this game.
I agree. I think they'll get in if they lose this game but beat Georgia. You're probably right, although that's not the mentality they have. But yes,
of course.
I agree with you. Mm-hmm.
So we got a 17-point spread, 64. Jimbo would really like. I would imagine this would be a signature win for Jimbo at this point in 2 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely it would be.
What do you think about this spot?
I kind of like the under in this one. I think 64 is a little too high. That's the current total. I do see 17. If I had to pick a side, I would take Texas A&M. I mean, as the dogs, in my opinion, I think they'd be suffered more as a bigger dog since we take matchup game.
Well, I don't know if you guys remember last year the 74-72 7 overtime game for this team. This matchup last year.
I remember.
Oh my goodness! I'm guessing, according to Token, we're not going to see that this time.
I want to rule it out, but I don't see it happening.
So I remember I was watching the spring game in the LSU spring game, and in the interview afterwards that Coach O gave for LSU, he talked about this game because they were trying to play with more pace and tempo and things like that, and he talked about being the loss to Texas A&M the previous year and how they thought about it and how they tried to develop an offense to sort of negate these games. So he felt like they kind of ran out of gas towards the end in those overtimes. And it was a point of emphasis throughout the year, and they talked about putting this game that's towards the end of the season, no matter where they stand, that they really wanted to put forth a good showing because they felt like they should have won that game multiple times in that one. And I think that's meaningful here. I don't think that this is a complete look ahead to the championship game a week from Saturday. I do think that they are going to care about this one, and they really want to lay into A&M here. Now, the thing is, can they do it? A&M is a pretty good team. Can they do it? Well, I don't know. That's a tough one. I'm the Token. If I had to play this thing, I would play the under. I do think it's a 2-8 points. But there's a little bit of me that really thinks that if LSU kind of gets on a roll here early on, they could really run away with this thing too. So I'm probably going to stay away from it, but it's close. I'm close on both of these. Maybe get some in-play action. Maybe in-play action. That's exactly kind of what I was aiming for. Is that I think I'm going to watch the game for sure, see how it develops, and then maybe make a wager from there. But the under, I agree with you. It does seem like it makes some sense. Absolutely agreed.
Yeah, both these defenses play pretty well, and
they do. They're really strong, especially up front. I like betting unders with with good defensive lines, and they both have them. So yeah, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, fair enough. Let's move on to Bedlam, Oklahoma at Oklahoma State. Well, this game wasn't as juicy as I thought it would be because Mr. Johnson has already eliminated the Big 12 from playoff contention. Thank you very much. Please get your parting gifts at the door. But we do have to play the game. Oklahoma is a 13.5-point favorite. The total is 69. Expectation, obviously, is always a shootout in this game. What do you guys think?
I like Oklahoma in this one. 13.5 sounds about the right number, but however, question mark for me is how well is Oklahoma State's quarterback and how will they be able to handle that. So.
Yeah, I have, this is another classic Tony Johnson scenario. I have absolutely no idea. And in this game, just not a clue. And the one thing I will say is that I was part of the problem here too. The drop off from Spencer Sanders to Drew Brown with Oklahoma State at quarterback is massive. It's bigger than I even thought. I mean, I thought there were maybe some points added there, 2, 3, 4 points or something like that. It's probably closer to like almost 10. Drew Brown is god awful. I don't know what happened or if he was just beating up on bad teams at Hawaii. But like he cannot play. I mean, he's just terrible. He was inaccurate with like 5 to 10 yard passes. He stumbled out of the line of scrimmage a few times. His footwork was terrible. Maybe it was his first start in a while. I don't know. He looked bad. So I don't really know how to handicap this with a bad quarterback. The problem is they're the best running back in college football. I think, with your boy Chuba. So I mean, can Oklahoma really stop anybody at this point? I mean, they've been abysmal on defense on the last 2 or 4 weeks. So I don't know what to do with this. I think Hubbard ends up with almost 200. And yet Oklahoma could still maybe come along if he even runs for 200. I don't know what to do. So I have no idea. No play. No, nothing.
Well, fun stat. Chuba Hubbard has 1,832 yards rushing. Of the 12 running backs to win the Heisman Trophy since 1980, only 4 had more than Chuba through this time.
Amazing.
So I think he gets the invite to New York.
I hope so. I sure hope so. He deserves it.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm on the over in this game. I'm gonna push for points. Pray, watch the game. Pray for just Matador defense all the way through from start to finish.
Yeah, you might get that. Actually. Yeah, that makes a little bit of sense actually. With you.
I'm gonna bold prediction and say that I'm gonna set my total at 92 and it goes over.
Nice. All right, 92 and the over, so good there. I like it.
51 to 44. That's what I'm going to say. So.
Okay.
All right. Last game on the docket here is Colorado at Utah, which obviously we know has playoff implications, provided that Utah wins, and they also win out in the Pac-12. 4 touchdowns here, 28. Colorado average team 1-3 on the road this year, 1-3 on the road against the spread. They are 5-6 straight up. This is more about just perfecting the victory or preserving the victory at this spot. I personally think that Colorado is going to do everything they can to beat up on Utah or to keep it close with Utah, and I'm going to take Colorado plus 4 touchdowns here.
Yeah, my play on this one, due to Colorado trying to keep this one close, is the over. I think that total is real low in my opinion. I do think Utah is going to score plenty and a lot of probably quick scores against this kind of weak Colorado defense. I'm not going to touch the spread, but give me the over 49.5. I do think Colorado probably puts up about 17 to 20 by themselves, and Utah is going to be in the 35 kind of range. Yeah, I'm really biased here. As you know, I've been on the Utah wagon from the start of the season. It's my biggest future bet. I got him at 300-1 to win the national championship, and then 3-1 to win the Pac-12. So, I don't know. They have just been rolling over everybody the last few weeks. This is an offense that can't seemingly be stopped with a healthy Zach Moss. It's hard to put him very, very much far behind Chuba Hubbard, to be honest with you. No disrespect to Jonathan Taylor, but I mean, this guy can do it all. He's incredibly good, and Huntley at quarterback is fantastic. He's developed beautifully, and both their offensive line and defensive line are 2 of the best in the Pac-12. So, Colorado, I think, really went for everything last week. The win against Washington was not only shocking, but I think surprising
how well they played on offense, how bad Washington's defense looked, and how lethargic they looked. Oh, man, I mean, just you want to lay 4 touchdowns, though. I mean, no, you can't really lay 4 touchdowns when the real prize is the week after. So, I mean, again, I'm too biased. I'm just trying to get through this so I can have a Pac-12 masterpiece, and hopefully they can sneak into the playoffs. But you know, if I had to bet it, I think I would take the 4 touchdowns. I'm with you. That's just too many points.
Fair enough. All right, guys, what do you guys like else in the late slate? We got a game that, I mean, personally has effect, but I'm sure has obviously lost the luster with Florida State being in the dumpster fire. But, you know, we have the Florida State rivalry that, you know, for so long was, when we're talking about, you know, BCS championships, et cetera, these two teams were always right at the top. You know, I have a play on that game, but that's purely just God, I hope Florida State keeps it close. I'm taking 18 points. And hopefully in Odell's last regular season game as the interim coach, he can squeak out a victory against Florida. That'd be great, but it's highly unrealistic. So I'm taking 18 points in that spot. What else do you guys see on the late slate? Anything that interests you or you got plays on?
I kind of like BYU at San Diego State. I think lane 5 is too low. I predicted that one should be right around 7. So it would need BYU lane 5.
Yeah, with the quarterback back, Zach, whatever his name is, Taylor, something like that, I can't remember his name, but he's back at BYU, and they're a lot better with him back. So I can get behind that one for sure, token them. I've got an under on the Fresno State game, but I mean, we don't have to get into that. That's kind of boring. But I do actually like Army at Hawaii, which is kind of fun because it's not only televised, but it is the super late game. So if you want to do some DJing and try to get some money back, that's a fun one. And that'll be, I think, really good. They gave away and or sold, from what I understand, 3,000 tickets to Army personnel that are stationed in Hawaii and in that area. So I think that this crowd is going to be more Army favorable than Hawaii. So it'll be kind of away from home a little bit. We don't really have any fear of Army doing anything stupid while they're there for the most part. So I just think that the matchup sucks for Hawaii. This is exactly the type of team that Hawaii struggled against. They were really bad against Air Force earlier this year, and obviously some similar things here between those two teams. I think Army goes in there and wins this game. They've not been good the majority of this year, but they've started to kind of turn the corner a little bit here, and then they got a couple of weeks off until the main game against Navy, and I think they'll win the win before that one. So I like Army money line here to get it done, to win outright.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same, Tony.
All right, fair enough. Good stuff. Hopefully, if you tell us this will go well for you this weekend. But we got a lot of. I'm hoping for doomsday scenarios. So I'm rooting.
Mayhem.
I want mayhem. I want Allstate to make a commercial with that guy. Mayhem and
just running him up through all the college campuses and punching mascots in the face and tackling the quarterbacks and stuff like that.
That'd be something you do.
Sure,
yeah, that would work.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
And I would like to send out.
The more messy, the better.
I would like to send out a formal apology to the Big 12 Conference. Tony Johnson has officially eliminated you from playoff contention. So.
I'm not the only one. Let it be known that it's not just Tony Johnson. There are others that have.
I would actually agree with Tony on that one as well.
No! We got a second here.
I mean, I give them less than 1% shot of getting a team in the playoff situation.
All right. Well, I will still hold out hope that you guys will get one of your teams in. So, all right. Well, that's where we wrap up. Let's thank the sponsors again. 12-Ounce Sports Radio, where we air every Friday evening, Saturday morning for NCAA picks, and Sunday morning for our NFL Picks podcast. Speaking of NFL Picks podcast, Tony Johnson, are you going to grace our presence this week?
I guess I probably should. Well, when are you doing it? I don't know when we're doing it, so they can usually varies on time. that it gets done. That's the key for me.
We've been doing it Saturday mornings, so
Yeah. Well, they're tough because I'm in total college football D-gen mode. It's difficult to get me away from D-genning.
I think that would be great if we had one of our guys at a sports book while we're doing picks. I mean, I think that gives us more credibility.
Oh, all right. Well, okay. Then let's make it happen this week. How about that? Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
I do
the in the background and all that.
In fairness, at least you are not in the gutter like Token, who's been throwing up moneyline dogs for days.
Oh, yeah. Well, I make a lot of moneyline dogs. I'm not going to get Token any shit because I also play a lot of moneyline dogs in our contest. So I cannot.
Right, but he didn't before. He's throwing them up now because he's so far back. I mean, he's throwing up Bengals.
Well, not only that, but give me credit. Last week I did actually like Carolina money line too. So
yes, I know. That was a really good pick you had. Then that was really strong. Yeah, they should win that game. That was good. Yes.
And how many points did you get for that?
I got one. But they covered the spread.
So, all right. We will catch you on the NFL podcast again. Thank you for 12-Ounce Sports for airing all of our dribble every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and Seat Giant promo code 12-Ounce Sports for your discounted sporting events, theater, and concert tickets. We are out for Token, for Tony Johnson. I am Aaron. We will catch you on the next one.